everybody, welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Delighted that you have stopped by. What are we all about? Well, this is a wine educational channel designed to help those of you that want to know more about certain topics in the world of wine, and specifically designed for those of you who are students of wine. And here we're looking at the wonderful South Africa, Series 7, looking at the large Cape South Coast region. We're going to initially here start at Walker Bay and the Hemel-En-Aarde Valley. You'll see wonderful Ataraxia Church there, which is run by Kevin Grant, who used to be a winemaker down at Hamilton Russell, now up here in the northern part of the ridge, making very great wines. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So excellent area to look at, really exciting wines. So yes, this is Series 7, and this is part 1 of 4. So this video is available as free content here on this world of YouTube, but parts 2, 3, and 4 are only available to those of you subscribed at my e-learning portal. That's at the bottom of the screen. You'll see winewithjimmy.com. So part 1 I'm going to crack on with. We're going to look at Walker Bay and specifically the Hemel-En-Aarde part of Walker Bay. First of all, let's discuss the Cape South Coast first of all. Quite difficult to find a really decent map that shows you the proper areas of the Cape South Coast. But really, we're if you look at Stellenbosch here, and where you would go through the Salaries Pass at Stellenbosch into Elgin, that is the divide there. Stellenbosch and then coming into Elgin. Elgin starts the Cape South Coast. Then all this area here, this red area, going into the Overberg, that's towards Caledon. Down to Hermanus, where we find, of course, brilliant whale watching, but Onrus River, Hemel-En-Aarde down here, down towards Stamford as well, and down to the Cape Agulhas as well, the most southerly tip of the Western Cape. But it extends further than this. Hopefully my arrow is working. Yes, it is. It extends further. There are parts here, and all the way along this section, we would consider these also the Cape South Coast. So there are pockets, wards, that are found dotted along that area as well. But really, most of the focus is around Elgin, Walker Bay for the most part, which is this yellow area, and Cape Agulhas down here, including the ward of Ilim, which is just up there. So that's what we're looking at in this section. So, of course, let's talk about something which immediately gives a huge impact on this area, and that's all of this massive amount of blue that you see here. So we have the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean on the left side, the Atlantic, the right side, we have the Indian Ocean. And the influences here of most part are very cooling, means that, of course, you can produce varieties like Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir. And in fact, the latter two are exceptionally important in areas like Elgin and Walker Bay. Now, while these districts have become well known for very good and outstanding quality wines, most plantings are recent. This is an area that really took root in 1990 onwards, after the end of the monopoly and the quota system of KWV. But it's a newcomer. Like Chardonnay, the grape is a newcomer. So therefore, it accounts for very little amounts of the total production. The Cape South Coast is 3% of the total of South Africa's production. So we are talking about small numbers, but of very high quality wines. Walker Bay. So we have another map here to show you the districts. So we have Elgin sitting just here, Overberg, Walker Bay around the bay of the same name, around Hermanus, and the Cape Agulhas in that southern section. Now, the area of Walker Bay is cool. It's immediately adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, as you can see from the map. And it came to prominence following the pioneering plantation of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir by Tim Hamilton Russell from the mid-1970s. I've been lucky enough to try their oldest vintage and try many of their wines through the years. and many followed suit after Tim Hamilton Russell. You now today find excellent producers along the whole of the Hemel-En-Aarde and further afield in Walker Bay. So of course we have the likes of the Bouchard Finlaysons, we have Summerridge, we have the likes of Restless River, we have Creation, we have Ataraxia, which is Kevin Grant, winemaker of Hamilton Russell. We have also Storm, made by Hannah's Storm, who's also an ex-winemaker of Hamilton Russell. So there's quite a wonderful list of producers here in the Hemel-En-Aarde, and not forgetting, of course, Bevan and Gordon at Newton Johnson as well. It's an exciting area to get stuck into. So Walker Bay, it's this area down here, as you can see. It's this kind of area, which includes well, Bot River, all the way down 32, 33, and 34 here, which is all the Hemel-En-Aarde, and then also 82, 78, and 86. So the ones we're going to focus on are Bot River, which will be done in the next video, and then all of the Hemel-En-Aarde 3 wards. That's the Hemel-En-Aarde Ridge, Hemel-En-Aarde Valley, and then the upper Hemel-En-Aarde Valley. So that's 33, 34, and 92. That's what we're going to focus on in this section. There's also small wards around Stanford. We have Springfontaine as well, and Sunday's Glen. Those 3 are much smaller, but still some interesting fruit coming from those areas. So we're going to be discussing the bottom 3 of the bolded ones here, all the Hemel-En-Aarde sections, as you can see just there. Right, let's get stuck into it then. So just generally to start with, I want to discuss the grape varieties that one finds in Walker Bay. Now, of course, you'll see Sauvignon Blanc is here. Now, Sauvignon Blanc does very well in a lot of the cooler parts of Walker Bay and the less known parts, because areas like the Hemel-En-Aarde are really focusing on Chardonnay and Pinot and at a premium level. So Sauvignon Blanc is not as important. But in the other wards, you will find significant amounts of Sauvignon Blancs. And also in Bot River, there's quite a bit up in that area too. So Sauvignon Blanc, but then look at Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Accounts for about a quarter of all plantations in Walker Bay, which is significant because you really don't see Pinot Noir ever sneaking into the top 5 grape varieties in any real districts or regions. So it's very significant here, and Chardonnay there as well. And Shiraz, we find a bit of Shiraz around the zone, and wonderfully cool climate expressions with a lot of rotundone, a lot of pepperiness. Cabernet Sauvignon sneaking in here as well. We also have a fair bit of experimentation here as well. Albarino, as planted by Bevan and Gordon Newton Johnson. There's also Viognier, found in areas like Creation up at the Hemel-En-Aarde Ridge, for example. So there's quite a bit of wonderful amount of experimentation happening here as well. So the 3 wards I mentioned. So we're discussing, just generally speaking so far, the Hemel-En-Aarde. First of all, what does that mean? It means heaven on earth. So wonderful name for such a gorgeous landscape here. But it's a collective name for the 3 wards that we find here. Now, this is the 3 wards that all project inland, going up the valley from Hermanus. And Hermanus is a beautiful, beautiful town on the coast. And it also boasts some of the best land whale watching in the world. Bit of a tongue twister, that one. So let's go through the wards. Now, Hermanus, you'll see it's just actually off to the bottom left-hand corner down here. And you have the likes of Whalehaven down here. Now, the areas we've got, the bottom part of it is what we call the Hemel-En-Aarde Valley ward. So that's here, which it stems from Southern Right, Hamilton Russell Vineyards, Ashbourne, Bouchard Finlayson, and La Viège. Then when you go to the upper Hemel-En-Aarde, this is the middle section. This is Summerridge, Newton Johnson, as we've discussed, Spookfontaine as well, amongst others. Restless River, Storm, for etc. And then as you go up here into the ridge, that's just off this mountain, but you'll see Ataraxia, you'll see Creation up here, and there are a few others as well as you go to the real far side of the ridge zone. So first of all, the Hemel-En-Aarde Valley, that is this lowest section. That's closest towards Hermanus and Onrus. So this is the lowest in altitude, and it's closest to the cooling effect of the Atlantic, and is the original planting area. Of course, this is where Tim Hamilton Russell planted first, and that is today called Hamilton Russell Vineyards. Pinot Noir and Chardonnay thrives here and produces a style which is fresh and bright from the other styles in the Western Cape, but still with a distinct ripeness. You'll find actually Pinot Noir can still easily get to 14% ABV in this area. Then the neighboring area is the upper Hemel-En-Aarde, as you can see in the middle there. This is slightly higher in elevation, and you'll find that there are vineyards you'll see on the northern side, but most vineyards tend to be on the southern side with aspect facing north, and that's to gain better ripeness. But of course, that absolutely doesn't have to always be the case. And then finally, the most deepest inland and the highest altitude is the Hemel-En-Aarde Ridge. This is the smallest, coldest, and highest. And you've got vineyards approaching 400 meters, and they are facing south and east in this area for the most part. Wines have a real distinct freshness, minerality, brightness behind them in that section. And please remember, this is a general map. It doesn't have all of the vineyards on. I've already named Storm and Restless River. So that's Craig Wessels at Restless River and Hannah Storm at Storm. They make cracking wines in this middle upper Hemel-En-Aarde Valley area. Climate then of this zone. So we would call this a cool climate. It is affected by the ocean, and you get cooling winds here, which reduce the risk of over-ripening and reduce vigor. The biggest problem still remains here, though, as disease pressure across the whole of the Hemel-En-Aarde. Rainfall is still much higher than you'll find in many other areas. So there is problems with disease pressure, but luckily you get that wonderful wind that comes up from around Hermanus Onrus and then heads up, and it does create real good airflow. And with real good work in the vineyards with canopy management, you're able to reduce the disease pressure. The average mean temperature in February is just over 20 degrees Celsius. So if you were following on and you're doing this in a logical process, the previous video would have been Klein Karoo of the middle area of the Brede River Valley and Klein Karoo. And Klein Karoo in February around Montagu was looking at 23.5. So you can see there's about nearly 2.5, 3 degree difference to somewhere like that in the height of summer. So yes, very fascinating in terms of its climate. Rainfall, like we mentioned. Now, the average rainfall sits at about 750 millimeters, but this does differ from the Hemel-En-Aarde Valley, the upper, and the ridge. There are distinct differences around those, but we're talking about a rough average here over the last 10 years, 750 millimeters. So the rainfall is generally less than Stellenbosch, Paarl, Worcester, Robertson, Darling, and Swartland, for example. So we tend to have a bit more here. And whereas, say, the Western Cape would go through drought and there are restrictions on water usage, dams are running quite low, here it doesn't really go into that process. You'll find that there is generally enough water in this area. Around 43% of the rainfall falls in winter months, about a quarter in spring, 10% in summer ripening season, and then around 24% in autumn. So actually during the growth of the vine through summer and autumn, you're looking at about 35%, just over a third of rainfall falling at that time. So this is pretty even rainfall distribution actually. That therefore means that you don't need actually a lot of irrigation because the rainfall is quite maritime in its approach. The topography, now those of you might have spotted this when I was looking at the ward areas of the Hemel-En-Aarde on that nice 3D map. In the background, you'll see the Bablastora Mountains, which is in fact what you see here in the background of this picture. Now, this mountain acts as a cloud trap. It collects moisture and it provides regular shade as well, certainly for those that are found on the northern side of the River Omrus. So it's quite an interesting area. So the Bablastora Mountains in that northern area. And as already mentioned, the vineyard aspect is generally towards the north. This is a picture taken from Newton-Johnson in the upper Hemel-En-Aarde. This helps achieve ripeness in a relatively cold area, and canopy management, remember, will also be well managed across the area because of things like disease pressure, for instance. Geology here. So clay can reach up to 55%, normally somewhere between 20 and 55% of the soil in parts of the Hemel-En-Aarde, which is actually quite similar to Burgundy, and that improves the water holding capability of the soils. Up towards the ridge, so the far highest point of the Hemel-En-Aarde, one will find Table Mountain sandstone. Remember on the first picture we had a church, that's Ataraxia by Kevin Grant. And the vineyards here, there are some vineyards that need irrigation because of the really well draining sandstone that one finds here. But also around there and then down to the upper, that sounds strange to say, but down to the upper Hemel-En-Aarde Valley, there's also Bokkeveld shales in this area. And you'll also find slightly softer shale and granitic soils dotted around as well. Now, cover crops are often used to reduce water evaporation, quite keen on holding the water here, though it is quite high. You'll find cover crops being used in vineyards, certainly in areas where the rainfall's a little bit lower, which is when you tend to go towards the upper Hemel-En-Aarde, for example. Key producers to look out for, I've already mentioned quite a few of them. From a historical sense, we are talking about the likes of Hamilton Russell. As I mentioned, I have tasted back to 1981. And phenomenal wines, really high quality, of course, with some great winemakers being in there. You know, you have Peter Allen Finlayson, for example. You have, Peter Finlayson. You have then the likes of Hannah Storm and Kevin Grant, some great winemakers who are now doing their own thing, of course. As you move up the ridge, you'll notice, of course, Bouchard Finlayson, a really solid producer. Keep moving up. I really like as you hit areas like Restless River by Craig Wessels, brilliant Chardonnay there. And then Hannah Storm making fantastic Pinot Noir all across the Hemel-En-Aarde. And finally, heading up towards places like Ataraxia by Kevin Grant, fantastic Chardonnay, very good Pinot up here. And then finally to Creation, where they make really, really solid wines across the board and are exceptional for food and wine pairing, certainly led by Carolyn up there, but also JC up at Creation. Some excellent, excellent stuff. So when you visit here, very much worth staying in Germanus and then moving your way up the ridge and definitely having a lunch or dinner at Creation. It's very, very well worth it. Okay, let's put what we've been learning into play here. Let's look at one of these wonderful Google Earth 3D videos to really visualize all this wonderful stuff around Walker Bay and the Hemel-En-Aarde Valley. So let's click away. There is South Africa. We're going to focus down, of course, on the Western Cape, the winelands out in the red outline just there. But now we're going to the area known, of course, as the Cape South Coast, where we're going to look at Walker Bay. So in that yellow outline there, that's the Walker Bay district. Let's go on to an important city here, which is called Hermanus. Very important. You might base yourself here if you're visiting here, and also great to set off here for whale watching. And then just north of Hermanus, you've got this wonderful valley, which of course we call the Hemel-En-Aarde Valley. This is an area which is climatically cool. It has rainfall, which is about 750 millimeters per year on the 10-year average. and you get really those wonderful cool winds coming up from the Atlantic that you can see in the background there. So this reduces the risk of over-ripening, and it also reduces vigor. What we're going to do is, because we're just looking at the whole valley here, the Hemel-En-Aarde, the Heaven on Earth Valley, remember it's split into 3 wards. First of all, the lower area. This is called Hemel-En-Aarde Valley. This is where it all began with the likes of Hamilton Russell, for example. Then next, in the middle part, we actually call this the Upper Hemel-En-Aarde Ward. And then finally, the most northerly bit where you find Creation, Ataraxia, this is in fact what we call the Hemel-En-Aarde Ridge. Those 3 combined with different geology, different aspects, and different altitude why they're separate. Now, it's all been in the shadow of this rather mighty mountain, which is called the Babelstårn Mountain, which acts as a cloud trap, collecting moisture and providing regular shade for all of these areas. So it's not only shady, but it's cooler in this area, which is absolutely wonderful, of course. And of course, what we find there is the likes of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc being very important in that area, in the Hemel-En-Aarde, Heaven on Earth. Don't forget about Bot River as well. That's another of the wards found in the Walker Bay, along with a few other minor wards as well. But that is everything in terms of Walker Bay. Wasn't that fantastic? Okay, so that brings me to the end of part 1, looking at the Hemel-En-Aarde. We are going to move on to the other parts now, looking towards the sort of northwesterly section of Walker Bay, and that is Bot River, or the Bot Riviera, as it's sometimes called by the likes of Seb Beaumont and Niels from Luddite. So really exciting area as well. Please do join me for that. If you do have any comments, questions, or concerns, please comment below this video. That will be very much obliged. Please make sure you click like and subscribe. And if you want to, you can use the social media at the bottom of every slide. And if you do find yourself in the UK, then please do come and say hi. Be great to see you. Come for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith, I've been Jimmy Smith, over and out. Too much talking. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.